Yo, this is Yo Fighting Freak Exo, and we at Pumpkin Hill. You ready? I ain't gonna let it get to me, I'm still going free. Down in Pumpkin Hill, I gots to find my lost piece. I know that it's here. I sense it in my feet. The great emerald's power allows me to feel. Alright, enough with that. Greetings and welcome back, gentles and ladiesmen, to the Sonic Adventure 2 research project. I'm Michael, and today we're going to be looking at Pumpkin Hill. And of course, as always, we're going to be starting off with our worst case scenario newbie run. And yeah, just as a quick aside, sorry I'm a little parched here. That's good water. Make sure you have some water on hand when you do commentary, folks. Makes a big difference. But yeah, more viewership on this than I expected. I don't know, I was expecting maybe a couple hundred people, because usually when I do like solo Let's Plays or whatever, I get like a few hundred views and that's it. But 2,000 views on the announcement, 2,000 views on the first episode, which surprised me. Figured that because people only seem to care about remake or rebreak, not sure why. I mean, if I didn't enjoy doing remake or rebreak, I wouldn't keep doing it. But at the same time, it is by no means my favorite thing that I do on the internet. Yeah, thank you all for your viewership, and thank you all for your questions, and I really appreciate those. Because it is my goal with this project to be as open and transparent about what I'm doing as possible, and to provide answers to any questions that people have. Because the goal is that if someone else wanted to recreate this and find their own data and, you know, sort of challenge my conclusions or the patterns I find, that they should be able to do that, just based on the commentary I provided here. And yeah, and I guess lots of people have, you know, correctly pointed out some limitations of the study, and that was when I made my announcement video. I was very upfront in saying that this is a flawed approach. This is a compromise. If I really wanted to do this the right way, I would recruit 100 inexperienced players and tell them not to use any hints at all. I'd recruit another 100 inexperienced volunteers and tell them to use 3 hints per shard, and then I'd recruit 100 experienced players who've been playing this game for at least 10 years to come in and just strut their stuff. And I don't know, whatever score they get the first time is the score they get. And then, you know, I take those distributions, do a t-test for independent samples, figure out if they're significantly different, and, you know, draw some conclusions on my research questions. So that's the dream design. Problems with that, and I guess I should be a little more thorough about why that's not doable for me, is number one, even though I am just a month away from receiving my Bachelor of Arts in both sociology and political science, which are both social science majors, and even though I have taken an entire course on statistics for the behavioral sciences and social research methods, I do not have any doctoral training. I do not have any undergraduate, or I mean graduate education, where I've done a few research projects before where I've actually collected and analyzed data. I've done a couple of qualitative studies where I analyzed data. Like, for example, I did for my senior capstone in political science, I grabbed a sample of 10 Donald Trump rallies, and took copious amounts of notes on them, and then identified patterns. That's a qualitative research project, because you're not using any numbers, and it's more like you take this rich data and you interpret it and then find patterns. And I've also done some more statistical stuff, some more quantitative research. Like I did a project where I created a survey and administered it to people and gave them a small battery of questions asking them about whether they would identify as feminist, whether they would identify as gender egalitarian, and then there was some other thing. And what I found from that is that people are much more likely to call themselves a gender egalitarian, including women and men. In fact, men were actually more likely to identify as feminist, which was interesting. But virtually everyone identified as gender egalitarian. And what gender egalitarian means is that you think that the two genders should be equal. Well, assuming that there are two genders, but that's getting too political. So I do have some experience with doing some of this stuff, and the reason why that dream research design would not work, again, is... So this is essentially an experimental design, and the things about an experimental design is you're supposed to have a control condition, an experimental condition. There needs to be random. You need to make sure that your participants are randomly distributed within both conditions, or there are several different approaches you can take with that. And there was some other third element. You guys can look up the classic experimental design if you want and look at all those pieces. And that's essentially what this is that, or at least what that hypothetical dream research design would be, is you randomly select 100 inexperienced players, you'd randomly select another 100 inexperienced players, and the experimental manipulation there is whether or not they use hints. And then based on that, you'd be able to compare them, and because it's an experiment, it would be in a controlled environment, and you do your best to correct for any spurious variables that could skew the results. And then whatever you get is what you get. And you can be fairly certain that the results you find are in fact due to the experimental manipulation or not. But I have no way to recruit, and the thing about experiments is you really do need people to supervise what's going on, so that you know that other things aren't creeping in that could skew the results in some way. And, you know, I don't have that. I don't have the resources to first reach out to 300 total subjects. And I really would need that many for the statistics to be, for the statistical power to work out. Like, honestly, you should probably get more than 100 for each condition. You'd need a lot of people, and I don't have the training or the resources to manage that many people and supervise them and make sure that going in, I can tell each of the inexperienced players in the control condition, do not use hints. And in the other condition, use all the hints. These are what the hints look like. Here's how you can view them from the menu, all that sort of stuff. And with the experienced ones, they wouldn't need as much supervision. They'd just be allowed to kind of take whatever approach they wanted based on their knowledge. But I don't have the resources to do that, and I'm pretty sure none of you guys do either. I mean, some people have suggested asking friends or looking at Let's Plays, and, you know, that maybe the Let's Play one could work, but how could I know how experienced or not each player was? Which Let's Plays would I pick? How could I control for previous knowledge? There are all sorts of other spurious variables that creep in when you go that route. And, you know, and another thing about that experimental design is that I'd need, when you have human subjects or participants involved in any study, whether that be an experiment or a survey or what have you, then you need special approval from an ethics oversight committee, essentially. If you're at a university, for example, you'd go to the institutional review board and basically show them your research design, say, this is what the participants would be doing. And some of the big ethics and social research that go in when you have human subjects says, the study needs to be voluntary, which is why generally when you receive like a survey by email or something, that they can't make you do it. It's because there have been some big ethics blunders in the past, like if any of you guys have heard about the Stanford prison experiment by Dr. Philip Zimbardo. It's a very interesting story. Basically, he was trying to test labeling theory and look at does giving people a label essentially affect their behavior. And he labeled certain people guards at this fake prison and certain people prisoners. And his findings were actually really interesting, but it ended up being that his participants were clearly there were some huge ethical violations with that, even though that did go through an IRB. And like, the guards were like, the participants that were labeled as guards were like, got really, really into it and got really, really bad, and the prisoners were like hurting. And if they had to stop the experiment prematurely, and it's probably a good thing that they did. But you know, there are other examples of studies like that in the past, like the stuttering study that fucked up some kids for the long haul, the kid participants. That's why we have IRBs. That's why we have ethics oversight committees. And you know, regardless, like a study like this would probably be harmless, but I'd still have to submit it to some kind of board or some kind of person with supervisory authority, have them say, yes, this looks okay, go ahead and do it. Because you got to make sure that people don't suffer harm. No harm should ever befall participants in a research study of any kind. If harm befalls them, whether that be psychological or physical, because that, you know, you don't want that. That's bad. And if you trick people, you're also supposed to tell them afterwards that we tricked you for this reason, so that, because there's something in social research called the Hawthorne effect, which is basically that if you know you're being studied or researched, then you change your behavior for social desirability purposes. It comes from a study where these folks studied this factory in Hawthorne, Illinois or something like that, Hawthorne, Connecticut. And they were studying these folks, and then they realized that they weren't finding what they were expecting, but it was because the workers at the place they were studying were basically changing their behavior because they didn't want the researchers to think badly about them. So sometimes you do have to trick your participants and not be totally upfront right away, but the ethic that goes along with that is that you're supposed to debrief them afterwards and say, we did this because we didn't want to skew your behavior. And, you know, give them an opportunity to talk it out, give them compensation if necessary, stuff like that. If you guys are interested in any of this stuff, I'm sure you can find out more online. But yeah, so that's why we're not doing the dream research design, is because I don't have the money, I don't have the training, I don't have the time. Because you guys got to realize the only reason I have time for even this is because A, I'm farther ahead on Sunshine than I figured I'd be at this point in time, and B, I'm still hammering out the script for that, and C, there's been a lull in college work that gave me time to actually sit down and record all these runs, and to provide the commentary as well. So this is what I have time to do. This is what I can do with the trainings I have as someone who's graduating in sociology and political science, and has had research design courses or social research methods courses and statistics courses, stuff like that. This is what I can do for you guys with the training I have. And yes, absolutely, 100% take it with a grain of salt. I mean, like, my hope is that when this is over and I show you guys my findings, because I have actually crunched all the numbers at this point in time, that you won't be saying, oh, ExoParadigmGamer proved this or proved that. That's not the kind of language I would use. The kind of language I would use is, ExoParadigmGamer estimated that it could possibly take up to this amount of time to complete this or that stage, and he estimated that, on average, you could possibly spend about this much time in this or that stage. And he identified general patterns that would suggest this or that. That's the kind of language you should be using with this study, because it's not perfect. It's flawed. It's compromise. I have to settle for recreating hypothetical scenarios, and you know, I wish I could do that dream study. I really do, but if I could, I definitely would. And you know, and even with Let's Plays or even just reaching out to some of my subscribers, I can't recreate that controlled environment that is necessary to do an experiment properly over the internet. It's just not possible. I'm sorry. And certainly if you have the resources to do that dream research design, I invite you to do it, because I'd be interested in what you find. The reason I'm doing this is not to shove my opinion about these stages down anyone's throat, though I certainly would like to give people guidance and help them out if they're interested. The reason I'm doing this is because I'm honest to God interested in answering these questions and figuring out what I find. As you can see, our newbie run, our recreation, we'll be talking more about that later, is about 14 minutes and 14 seconds, which is pretty fucking long. If I spent 14 minutes in Pumpkin Hill in my first playthrough, I'd hate this game too. So yeah, doing the study has given me such an appreciation for what a new player could possibly go through. Hold on, my throat's a little dry. Yeah, that's good. By the way, fuck you, Elma Chow. By the way, you can see that I'm spending time by that upgrade spot. Just to quickly get this discussion out of the way. A lot of people have correctly pointed out that a new player, when starting off this game, would not have the upgrades. And they are absolutely correct. I went through the stage select for expediency purposes. But just a couple of notes in response to that. Number one... Sorry, got a text just now. Couple notes in response to that. Number one, in every stage that has an upgrade, for both the Newbie Run and Full Hint runs, which are supposed to be for inexperienced players, I will make a point of visiting the upgrade spot each time to correct for the fact that the person would not have the upgrade. Number two, upgrades acquired in later stages are never required to complete earlier ones. So for example, in this level we found the Shovel Claw, I believe is what it's called, which allows Knuckles to dig, and certain emerald shards can only be found by digging. Now, now we're in Pumpkin Hill, right? So now that we have the Shovel Claw, if we were to go back to Wild Canyon, for example, you would not need the Shovel Claw to find any of the emerald shards at all. And having the Shovel Claw does not make the stages any easier or faster or whatever. It doesn't affect it at all. One person did say that, but don't you need the Shovel Claw or the Drill Pick to do the dive move? No, actually you do not. You have that right off the bat, and you guys can go ahead and start a new save file in Sonic Adventure 2, go try out Wild Canyon and Dry Lagoon. Just right from the start, you jump, you hit the action button, both characters can do the dive move right off the bat. So the fact that I'm doing the dive move, you could potentially do that. You would not need the upgrades for that. And certainly the hammer gloves and the iron boots, the upgrades that allow characters to break metal containers, you never, in any of the stages before you require those upgrades, at no point would you ever need those upgrades to access emerald shards from earlier ones. At least not in the first mission, which is what we're really talking about. For later missions in the stage, like Mission 5, which is the hard mode, which is actually easier than the first mission, because, just as an aside, the 5th mission in each treasure hunting stage is hard mode, and that's where you get 3 very specific emerald shard locations. You can still use hints, and it's the same every time you play the stage. It's the same 3 shards every time in hard mode. So that actually makes them easier technically. So if you want the A rank in those stages, you have to basically memorize the locations and go to them in order. But you know, that's an aside. Those aren't required. That's only really if you want all the emblems and want to get extra mileage out of the stage. But yeah, so upgrades. The fact that I have all the upgrades right off the bat should not significantly skew the results of these estimates one way or another. You know, especially since, as you noticed, when I started Pumpkin Hill in this run, I went to that upgrade spot right away. When I started the Full Hint run, I went to the upgrade spot right away. Now, as for the trial runs, I didn't necessarily go to the upgrade spots every time. And I don't know, that would definitely maybe make them a little shorter, but if you're an experienced player, you'd know where they are anyway, and they're not hard to find. And if I wanted to replay these stages as an experienced player, I would just play them from the stage select, and especially if you're going for the A rank, I'd probably reset the stage to cut off that amount of time. I don't know, I don't think it's going to make a huge difference, and that's what we have our standard deviation statistics for, to say, like, you know, it could probably add maybe this much time on average. So I don't know, that's probably another flaw, but I don't think it'll make a huge difference in our findings. Certainly you can recreate the study and factor that in if you'd like, but yeah, upgrades shouldn't significantly affect anything. Another thing I should mention, just in response, is when I'm doing my Full Hint runs in my Newbie runs, I'm not just doing things randomly, I'm not just randomly fucking about. There is a method to my madness. For each of the Newbie Run stages, the Newbie Run is essentially supposed to be the nightmare, worst case scenario for each of these stages. That you have to go to all the little platforms and all the little areas in the stage 3 times before you find the emerald. Which is also why if there's like an emerald right in front of my fucking face and I'm doing a Newbie Run of the stage, that I ignore it. Because we're basically pretending that the RNG that we got was so bad that we had to play through the entire stage view, and then we find it at the very last second. And that's what that looks like. And the reason I'm doing it that way, the reason why I'm going for the worst case scenario is because that's something I can recreate, I think, relatively accurately. I can get pretty close with an estimate on that, I believe. In my opinion, anyway. But the other reason is because you always hear these horror stories that, oh, Mad Space took me 20 minutes to beat, and I was genuinely curious. Could it take that long in some of these stages? And the answer is, of course, it depends on the stage. But on average, actually, let me look. I have my stats, so let me open my spreadsheet real quick. Where the hell did I put it? Pulled out all the stops for this one, folks. I can give you my estimate real quick of how long it takes these stages on average. Okay. So our grand newbie main for the entire study is 13 minutes and 28 seconds. So in the absolute worst case scenario, where you have to go through every little piece of the stage 3 times, it will take you, on average, 13 minutes and 28 seconds to complete the stage.
I found him.
And the standard deviation is also important. That's 5 minutes and 36 seconds. So that means that it could take you as little as 8 minutes, and it could take you as long as 21 minutes, based on that standard deviation. So that's the worst possible case scenario for these stages. Another thing I should mention for Pumpkin Hill is I did actually have to redo my newbie and full hint runs. And the reason for that is because the newbie run is because in both runs I forgot about those, like there are 5 of these hole-shaped pumpkin mountains surrounding the stage, and for some reason when I did my newbie run full hint run the first time, I forgot about those mountains. And yeah, that adds quite a bit of time to the stage, so I just went ahead and redid them. Those runs, and kept the original 5 trial runs I had, because, you know, each time I'm replaying the stage, I'm getting a little better at it, so I didn't want to, you know, do 5 more of those, and they were perfectly fine to begin with, so I just kept them. And on a related note, we will also be redoing Wild Canyon. And the reason we're going to be doing that is because my original run of Wild Canyon, I think the original full hint run and newbie runs of Wild Canyon were actually not thorough enough. Like, as I kept going through these stages and realizing how many little nooks and crannies there are that you have to look in, I realized that I wasn't taking enough time in Wild Canyon to really look at all those. I kept kind of flying past stuff and counting that as going there. So I'm gonna be uploading some new footage later on for Wild Canyon that will up it from about 5 minutes for the newbie run to about 7 minutes if you have to look through all the little areas. So yeah. By the way, right now we're doing the trial runs, but I'm actually a little behind on what I'm talking about. Angel's Ring. So that hint on its own is not too obvious, but when you think, what's an angel's ring? It's a halo, so it's like, it's probably, we're looking for some kind of ring that's floating above something. And when you look around at these pumpkin-shaped mountains surrounding the stage, that's probably what it's referring to, and I think eventually I arrive at one of those mountains and find that indeed it's like floating in a circle pattern around the top of one of the pumpkin mountains. But yeah, so that's how the newbie runs work. Certainly, you feel free to do your own newbie runs based on that definition I have and see how long it takes you. My guess is, depending on which order you go to them. It'll probably change the time slightly. But again, when I'm going to be going and answering my research questions, I'm going to be doing that based on a grand newbie mean, which I've already shared, and a grand newbie standard deviation. And then we're basically going to be comparing distributions for all 9 stages against each other to see whether or not they're significantly different statistically. That's the, yeah, you can see the emerald floating around the head. So that's what we're going to be doing for that. So I don't think that the small amount of time difference it could take that'll be factored into the standard deviation at the end, so shouldn't be too bad. And again, these are estimates to begin with, so take it seriously, but take it with a grain of salt as well. That's the deal with that. As you can see, I used hints and beat the stage in 3 minutes and still got my A. So as for the full hint run, so the idea is that we're comparing the worst case scenario for not using hints to the worst case scenario for using 3 hints per shard. And if even in the worst case scenario we reduce times, that would indicate that hints help. So so the way I define a worst case scenario for the full hint run is you have to go through the entire stage and look at all the set pieces at least once to correct for the fact that you wouldn't know the level design at all, and then you use 3 hints per shard. And one thing that I actually realized, I was talking to another YouTuber named GamerGuide7Aces. He does Sonic theories with a mutual mutual pal named Husky Z. He also goes by Altier Sorrows. And he was telling me that it's, he was telling me to check out his initial run of Wild Canyon. He did it in a Let's Play, so it was recorded. And I realized that there's nothing in the game that tells you that you can look at hints from the pause menu. Like, Omochao right off the bat says, use hints! But he doesn't tell you that you can look at them from the menu. And if you only just see the hint, but never look at it again, it's entirely possible that you could forget about it. Because, like, you'll see that even when I do my full hint runs, I'm always pausing to check all 3 hints. So, I don't know, that's one of those things is, how much can you blame the game for that? How much do you blame the player? Because, like, eventually you'll figure it out just by pausing the game because you have to go to the bathroom or something, but it's possible that you could play through the entire game and miss that, not know about that, and still use hints. So, yeah, that's another flaw, I guess. But, I don't know, I'm going to assume that the player knows that they can check it from the pause, I guess. That's another flaw with this study. Again, estimates.
Yeah, this is
Another A rank. And again, the reason we're doing 5 trial runs is to correct for the RNG. I would do 5 runs for the newbie and full hints as well, but since they're estimates anyway, I don't think it makes that much of a difference. So we're on trial run 3. I guess I'll say a little bit more about what the stage is like. So it's about to fall off. So that hint, based on that, it's not super obvious what that's referring to. I think the idea is that when you read that the first time, it's supposed to be suggesting that it's on the edge of a platform somewhere. But just based on that hint alone, you don't know exactly where it is, but it does give you an idea of what you're looking for. And sure enough, over there you can see the emerald hanging off the edge of the church, so it's about to fall off. So that hint, I'd say, is helpful. Another thing that people told me is that, yes, it is definitely true that there are a finite number of locations for emerald shards in each stage. I don't know exactly how many. Feel free to tell me in the comments. And people are saying, well, an experienced player would know where all these are and would be able to speedrun the stage and get the maximum point bonus, just go straight to it based on the first hint. That's not how I define an experienced player for the purpose of the trial runs. I define, because like the popular myth you always hear, the popular wisdom, I guess, is that people only like these stages because they have them memorized, because they've been playing them for years. So that would be like my generation, the Dreamcastians, that language I don't use anymore to describe groups of Sonic fans, the group that grew up with Sonic Adventure 1, 2, and Heroes and Shadow and all that stuff, that have been playing this game for over 10 years and would ostensibly know everything about these stages. And yeah, that's what I define an experienced player as, and I don't think most of the people in that population would have memorized every shard location for each stage. So that's how I'm defining an experienced player for the purpose of this, and I think I represent that. The idea is that this population would know the general layout of the stage, they'd know how hints work and how to use them, and that just knowing the stage would help them. That's the question we're testing. Does knowing the stage make them go faster? Significantly faster, statistically speaking. And my results would indicate that yes, in fact, they do. Which it shouldn't be too surprising, I think. That's pretty intuitive, but now I have some numbers that would suggest a pattern that would support that conclusion. But, yeah. I think the hint for this one is the Ghost Pumpkin's necklace. So when you read that, you're thinking, oh, they're probably talking about those pole-shaped mountains that have the little heads on them, and that must mean the emerald is around its neck somewhere. And sure enough, it was. There's another A rank, folks. So, like, again, and thank you all very much for sharing. It's very interesting, this playthrough, because I always thought that I was, like, the only one. Certainly, it feels like that sometimes. I was at least the only one I know, personally, who really knows how these stages work and can do them really fast. So it was interesting to hear people sort of share their different strategies, and so I can kind of compare notes, so to speak. I mean, it's been interesting because a couple of people said, hey, I tried your method, Exo, and it was really fast and I still got the A rank. And that's cool. It's kind of fun talking about this in more depth, because instead of just saying, it's good or it's bad, the part of the reason I wanted to do this, even though the study itself is flawed, is just so that I could talk about all these stages and provide some more in-depth commentary. But I digress. I think the hint was something about a cemetery. 3 brothers' tombstones. So we have 3 tombstones here. So we know it's in this general area, and the radar is blinking. That means it's gotta be in this area somewhere. So now we're just kind of looking. Looks like it's in the box. By the way, if you fall in the pit in this level, there's actually wind that will push you back up, so don't worry about that. Major set pieces for Pumpkin Hill. We have Ghost Train Mountain, Pumpkin Field Mountain. Oh yeah, the emerald was in the ghost. Sad-eyed pumpkin. So that's probably referring to one of the 5 big pumpkins surrounding the level. So we're looking for one that has a sad face, and that's where we're going to find the emerald. So that hint, I think, is pretty direct and helpful. But yeah, you have Pumpkin Mountain, Ghost Train Mountain, and Church Mountain, and then there's kind of like a bunch of mini platforms in the center, and then there are these 5 pole-shaped mountains that surround the stage. So this level is bigger, much bigger than Wild Canyon. But I'd still say that in terms of sheer size, it's about the same as Red Mountain from the first game. I'd say this is about as big. The only difference is that there are more little platforms, but there are lots of little platforms in Red Mountain as well. The only difference is that the hints made it so obvious, and the radar was so much stronger that that level was easier. But you know, I guess I don't think that necessarily makes it better. Certainly, if you're someone who doesn't want to play these to begin with, you certainly would prefer the one that's easier and requires less effort. But in my opinion, playing something like Pumpkin Hill, regardless of its flaws, is much more interesting, because there's actually some detective work involved regarding the hints and learning the stage layout and all that kind of stuff. And so that, in my opinion, makes it better. That's my preference. But certainly I understand why people would prefer SA1 stages over this, because they are a lot easier. And, you know, SA2s aren't necessarily harder for the right reasons, I guess. I think this one is telling me that it's floating out somewhere, and eventually I figure out it's floating out in front of the church, in the air, you see? So, yeah, that's... If I reach an area and find that, fuck, I followed the hint, but I still can't figure out where to go, I'll use another hint. It's worth it. It's worth it to finish the stage faster. That's my big advice to you. If you're looking to A-rank treasure hunting stages in Sonic Adventure 2, the time bonus you get for completing stages faster is way bigger than the points bonus you get for finding them without hints. If you want to get A ranks, that is the best way to do it. It requires a lot less stage memorization, you'll do it faster, and yeah, and certainly you can combine that with whatever strategy you use already. For some reason I hang out in this menu for like 30 seconds. I don't know why. I really should have cut this out. Yeah, my mouth is just super dry today. It happens when you do commentaries. I don't know why. Anytime now, past me. Anytime now. While we're young! My Jim Carrey Grinch impression isn't very good, but here's our last trial run. So let's see what kind of run we can get. And I guess in this stage at least, I would have controlled for not having the upgrade, because you have to fly to that. It's pretty hard not to fly to that middle area. For some other stages, you kind of have to go more out of your way to get the upgrade, so it won't be as corrected for. But yeah, doing this project, this was a complete coincidence. I found that right away. Yeah, let's check out the next hint and see what it's like. Under the tracks, so that's probably referring to Ghost Train Mountain. There are some tracks on Pumpkin Mountain, but if it was there, the radar would be beeping as we flew down, so since it wasn't, next best bet is definitely Ghost Train Mountain, because there are tracks. And then, sure enough, you look, right under the tracks is where the second emerald is. I think this is my fastest run of the stage of the 5. Flaming Emerald, so we're looking for fire somewhere. And yeah, I don't necessarily remember where all the fire is, because they're Church Mountain and Pumpkin Mountain look pretty similar, but there's some flamethrower guys that didn't beep, so it's probably referring to a different one. Keep flying around. That's my other estimate, is if you get to something that the hint seems to be referring to, but it's not beeping, there's probably a similar set piece somewhere else in the stage that you're supposed to be looking for instead, so... Yeah, you could beat these stages in, like, this stage and the short... Well, actually, let's wait till we get to the statistics, because that's coming up next here real quick. But yeah, I think I got an A every time for Pumpkin Hill, but yeah. So let's take a quick look at our statistics. Alright, Pumpkin Hill. 14 minutes, 14 seconds for the newbie run. That's an estimate, remember. 6 minutes and 47 seconds for the full hint run. So there are the trial scores, the trial mean. On average, I can complete the stage in about 2 minutes and 20 seconds, plus or minus 41 seconds. So the slowest I could beat this is in about 3 minutes, the fastest I could beat it is in about 1 minute and 40. So yeah, and that's pretty close to the actual numbers if you look up there. And as for the differences between our means, full hint minus newbie, so using hints you can shave off about 7 minutes in the stage, and trial mean minus newbie, so if you know how the hints work and you know the stage layout, you could shave off an additional 5 minutes about-ish. Actually about 4.5 minutes. So yeah, so hints and experience make a huge difference in Pumpkin Hill. Yeah, and certainly that's pretty much all I could say about this stage. I think I've covered it pretty succinctly. So yeah, that covers Pumpkin Hill. Thank you all for watching. Please join me next time in the next episode when we'll be talking about Aquatic Mine, which is an interesting stage. So yeah, until then, I'm Exo, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please join me next time.